Coach Bradley Dunn here of the Lees-McRae men's lacrosse team, checking in from beautiful Banner Elk. Tonight I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming you to the third event of our Alumni Summer Series, featuring one of Catlax's founding fathers, Mr. Eric Troutman, as he takes us behind the scenes of his Concord, North Carolina brewery, 26 Acres. Eric is a 1998 graduate of Lees-McRae College, where he majored in business administration. He is married to a fellow 98 Bobcat alum, Miss Melissa Jenkins Troutman. Together they have two beautiful children, 15-year-old Natalie and 10-year-old Jacob. Lees-McRae is so much more than just the alma mater of Eric and Melissa. When Eric asked Melissa to be his wife, it was our beautiful on-campus waterfall that made up the backdrop. When they were married, it was in the Presbyterian Church right here on campus. To say that the green and gold runs deep within them would be an understatement. Since graduation, Eric has stayed involved in our sport of lacrosse as a coach and a mentor to several teams, but it is his passion for craft brewing that brings him here tonight. Eric started out as a small-scale home brewer, working out of his garage, but through his dedication to his craft, he quickly became well-known across the homebrewing landscape and receiving awards at the state, local, and national levels. His passion became his career in 2016 when he opened 26 Acres Brewing Company with two other craft beer enthusiasts. Together they have built one of North Carolina's finest craft breweries, centrally located in Concord, just minutes from downtown Charlotte. As the head brewer of 26 Acres, Eric regularly keeps 12 to 16 different beers on tap. They pour flights for tasting, full pints for sipping, and fill growlers and cans so you can enjoy their spirits at home. We here at Lees-McRae Men's Lacrosse are so proud of Eric and all of his successes, and would like to invite you to sit back and enjoy this look behind the barrels with our Catlax alumni, Mr. Eric Troutman.
Hey guys, my name is Eric Troutman. I'm a Lees-McRae graduate from the class of 1998. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I really love coming to Lees-McRae. I did a lot of fun things while I was in school there. I majored in business administration and management and got a computer science minor. I also played on the very first college lacrosse team for Lees-McRae. A few of the extracurricular things that I did was I fly fished a lot, I snowboarded and skied a lot, and played golf while I was up there, really making the best of my time in the mountains. I met my wife, Melissa Jenkins, who's also a graduate in the class of 1998, the very first day of our freshman year. We ended up getting married on campus at the Presbyterian Church, and I proposed to her at the dam right behind the mill pond. The two of us loved Lees-McRae. After graduating from college, I moved back home to Charlotte. When I got back to Charlotte, I started working in computer technology with Carolina's healthcare system. I was with Carolina's healthcare system for right at 20 years. In my 20 years there, I did many things from develop web applications to database design and some technician work. But beyond the hospital, I developed a passion for brewing. I love craft beer and I want to learn how to make it myself. So in 2007, I decided to give a shot and make my own beer. I started in my garage and the first batch did not turn out as I intended. I set a couple things on fire, not the house, luckily, but it was a fun experience and I really enjoyed it, and there was only one way to go from my first time, and that was up. So I kept brewing and kept going at it and kept growing my system and my skill set. And over the years, I was fortunate enough to win a couple medals locally, at the state level, and national for some of my homebrew beers. In 2015, me and two buddies decided to form 26 Acres Brewing Company. This took about a year of planning and development, and a lot of time behind the computer desk and at the brew site, trying to figure out how we can construct a brewery that will be conducive to a large taproom crowd and a production facility. So in 2016, we opened up 26 Acres Brewing Company just outside of Concord, North Carolina. We are 4 miles from the Charlotte Motor Speedway and 1 mile from Concord Mills, the largest tourist attraction in North Carolina. So why do we call ourselves 26 Acres? We are not on 26 acres of land. That's the question we get asked every single day. We called ourselves 26 Acres because Concord was founded on 26 acres of land in 1796. The Germans and Scotch-Irish were fighting over where to put the courthouse, and Stephen Cabarrus, who was a senator of the state of North Carolina, decided that those 26 acres would be where the state court, where the Cabarrus County Courthouse would reside. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about our production brew house. This is a 15-barrel brew house. A barrel of beer is 31 gallons. So we make 465 gallons of beer every time I make a batch of beer. This brew house is heated by steam. Our steam boiler is over here in the corner. This is the heart of our brewery. Without the steam boiler, we cannot produce the heat required to make beer. This boiler costs a pretty penny to put in, but it's, like I said, it's like the heart of the brew house. It heats the hot liquor tank. This tank right here is nothing more than filtered hot water. It also heats the mash tun, and it heats our boil kettle here. So let's talk about how we make beer. Making beer is very simple. It comprises of hops, malt, water, and yeast. Just those 4 ingredients at the basic level. You can also add fruit, spices, and vegetables and various other things depending on what type of beer you make, but at the root level, it's hops, malt, barley, and water. We get all of our grain in 50-pound bags. It comes shipped from our supplier outside of Asheville. What we have here is actually enough grain to make a couple batches of beer that I'm going to be making over the next few days. What I do is I take this bag, or these bags, and I run them through our grain mill. What this does is it takes the whole kernels of barley and it cracks the kernel, and it exposes the inside of that kernel, called it's a real starchy substance. So after the grain gets cracked, it travels up this pipe right here, this white PVC pipe, and it goes all the way into the conical tank up here called a grist case. That grist case stores the grain before we start our brew day. Actually, right now, I've got it full of grain for tomorrow's brew day. So when I come in, my water will be hot. I'll open that valve at the bottom of that tank, and we'll get to growing. So after the grain is dry, after the grain is up inside the grist case, the grain will come down this chute right here. At the same time, I have hot water coming down this pipe right here. When the grain falls down in this is called a grist hydrator. When the grain falls down in there, it spreads apart. There's an upside down cone inside there. It spreads apart and the hot water hits it. The water is about 150 to 155 degrees. When it hits that cracked grain, there's a conversion that takes place. And it converts those starches in the grains to fermentable sugars. The grain will then fall down into this mash tun. What we see here are my rakes and my plow. So this turns around and around and around. And I set it so it turns forward and it turns backwards the entire time I'm mashing in my grain. All right, so once we get all of our grain in here, we'll let it sit in here for about an hour. In that hour, all of our conversion takes place. We're converting the starches to fermentable sugars, which is what we need to produce beer. So after it's here for an hour, I go through a process called Vorlauf. And what that is it's clarifying the wort. And wort is unfermented beer. It's what's produced in here. So what I do is I take all the water that's in here and I recirculate it over top of the grain bed. And in the bottom of this mash tun, there's a grated bottom. And these grates are very, very fine. They're about the thickness of a needle. So all the grain sitting on top of here, all the water will go through here. It goes through my pump system and then back on top, and it recirculates. This takes around 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, I can look down at my sight glass, which is down here, and I can see what used to be a muddy color. It will be really clear. And at that point, I'm ready to transfer it to the boil kettle. So to do that, I'll reconfigure my diverter panel here, and I'll take the wort from the mash tun, and I'll pump it over to the bottom of the boil kettle, and I'll fill the boil kettle up from the bottom. Like I said earlier, this is a 15-barrel boil kettle. It holds 465 gallons of beer. which is almost 30 kegs when you finish it, when the beer's finished. So this kettle takes about an hour and a half to fill up. You don't want to go too fast because you'll compact your grain bed and your mass ton if you run your pumps too quick, and that ends up being a very long day. So you go nice and slow, and you fill your boil kettle up. Hour and a half or so it takes to fill up. My fill mark is right here. After it fills up, it's time to get it to boil. This is where that steam boiler comes in very, very handy, because if that's not powerful enough to boil almost 500 gallons of liquid, we got a problem. So we get this thing to boil. It takes, I've been asked before, how long does it take to get this thing to boil? Well, I don't, the water is coming in here at 155, 160 degrees, so it's only raising up 60, 70 degrees, and I start heating it up as I'm filling it up. So once I get to full kettle, I'm only waiting about 15 minutes for it to get to boil. After it boils, once it starts to boil, you throw in your hops. And based on the beer that you're making, you're throwing in different ingredients. But say we're gonna make a normal blonde ale, like tomorrow, I've got my recipe for a blonde ale. So once this thing gets to boil, I will throw in my hops, my bittering hops at the very beginning of the boil. Let them boil for an entire 60 minutes, because I'll boil for an hour for this beer. In 60 minutes, those hops will bitter the beer, but it's not gonna be bitter like an IPA. It will be a tad bitter. And then later in the boil, because I want some of the flavor and aroma of the hops, I throw more hops in. Because the longer you boil something, the less flavor you're gonna get out of it. When we make a fruited beer, I don't boil the fruit at all. I put the fruit in fermentation, so we get the most flavors and aromas out of that fruit. So we boiled for an hour. We're ready to rock and roll. So what we do now is a process called Whirlpool. So in this tank, we throw a lot of hops in there, and there's a bunch of gunk floating around in this beer. So we want to swirl. I can reconfigure my diverter panel to turn my Whirlpool on, and it will turn all the liquid around in this boil kettle, and I'll Whirlpool it for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the beer. If I use a beer that's got make a beer that's got a lot of hops in it, then I'll Whirlpool longer, because I want to pull all of those hops into the middle of the kettle. Because my pickup point from the kettle to send it to the fermenter is right here. It's on the edge of the boil kettle. So once we've whirlpooled, we've let it rest, we've got a nice hop cone in there, then it's time to run it through the heat exchanger. So I'll take this close to 200 degree wort by the time we whirlpooled. I'll run it through my heat exchanger, which if you look under the brew deck, there's something that looks like a radiator. On the right side, city water runs through those fins on the right, and that's the first place that the hot wort hits. The second fin's on the left, that's glycol, and that's a 27 degree food safe refrigerant that the wort comes in contact with. So we've gone from 200 degrees, and by the time we come out of here, I'm about 68 degrees. And from here, we pump it over to one of our fermenters. These fermenters are 30 barrels, so these hold about 1,000 gallons of beer. I have to brew 2 times in my system to fill up one of these tanks. So we pump the beer over. And it goes right into the bottom of the port. And then we fill it up. Once we get it full from our brew day, then I take my yeast, which you cannot make beer without yeast. So when the the wort is in here, it's coming out of the system at 68 degrees. I've got it filled up to where I need it to be based on my boil level or boil volume. Then I add my yeast. My yeast gets right to work. And yeast make beer. I just make wort. So the yeast produce alcohol. So without the yeast, you're not going to get any alcohol. So yeast have they're a single cell organism. They have 2 byproducts. One is alcohol and one is CO2. Now if you look in this bucket right here, this is an actively fermenting big batch of beer. That's CO2 bubbling out of my tank. We do not want to keep that in here while the beer is fermenting. It takes about 2 weeks to ferment a beer. So after we're done fermenting the beer, what I can do is I'll walk over to my control panel. I find the tank that the beer's completed, the fermentation is complete, and I turn the temperature down. I can control everything on the production side with this panel. It's all computer controlled. I can control it from my cell phone. And so it's very nice. So if I'm laying in bed at night, I can check my tanks to make sure everything's okay. Nothing's too hot or too cold. But I turn my tank down to about 50 degrees and I let it sit overnight, and all the yeast, and if there are any hops that I've thrown in the beer during fermentation, they'll all settle out of the bottom of the tank. And so then I have to get it out of there because we don't want that going into our bright tank where we put the beer to finish. So once you've got the tank, we call it cold crashed. Once you've got the tank cold crashed, all of the sediment that's in the beer is falling down here. I hook up a CO2 line to this side of the tank, this arm right here, and I'll put a little bit of pressure on the tank. And what that does is that just makes it a little bit easier for me to get the junk out of the bottom of the tank. So I dump the bottom of the tank until I see clear beer. And at that point, we take the beer from our fermenter and we put it in what's called a bright tank. This is a finishing tank. This tank does not have a conical bottom like our fermenters do. It's got a dishpan bottom. All of the sediment and all the proteins, all the stuff left behind from beer production by the yeast has been removed. This tank the only purpose it serves is to carbonate the beer and to clarify the beer. So after the beer has been put in here, it's been clarified, it's been carbonated. We carbonate it by hooking a CO2 line up to this device here. This is a carb stone. It's basically an aquarium air stone, but sanitary. It's about that long, so we can carbonate this beer in a matter of hours. Once we've got it carbonated, we hook up a kegging manifold to the bottom of this tank right here, and then we fill kegs with it. It takes us about 7 minutes per keg to fill a keg. This is another 30-barrel tank. This can hold about 60 kegs worth of beer, so it's basically a full day to empty this tank into kegs. All right, when we first started out, we had 3 tanks. We had this tank, this fermenter, and this bright tank. So at one time, I can only have 3 beers going. So in the past 3.5 years we've been open, we've tripled our capacity. So now I have 6 of these 30-barrel fermenters and 2 30-barrel bright tanks. So I can have almost 8,000 gallons worth of beer fermenting and conditioning at the same time. When we first started, I could only have about 3,000 gallons of beer fermenting. That made it very challenging when I had 5 to 6 production beers. So when we first opened, it was a juggling match to try to get everything brewed and keep these tanks full because our consumption level was so high. People were drinking all of our beer, and we got bottlenecked. In a brewery, your bottleneck is your fermentation area because you can't put any more beer in here when it's full. Once you go through the whole 2-week process of fermenting it, then you can put more beer in here. So, like I said, 3.5 years, we've about tripled the capacity. We're now distributed all across the state of North Carolina, mostly in the Charlotte area and up in Raleigh. We have a couple accounts out at the beach, Winston-Salem, and then a couple spots in the mountains that you can find some of our beers. All right, so once the beer's kegged, where does it go? We put all of our kegged beers into our cold room. This cold room is 26 feet long, 16 feet deep, and 16 feet high. Me and my 2 business partners and a couple of our investors built this cold room over the period of 2 days. This door weighs 600 pounds and was probably the hardest thing to get up there. It took a forklift to get this thing mounted on top of the slider beam up there. So inside of our cold room, it's a little bare at the moment because we've sold a lot of beer during this pandemic, but we have all of our cans in here and kegs. is right here. All these shanks go straight through into our tap room from the wall. So all of our beer is kept at 36 degrees in here. That's it. All right, so this side of our brew house is our pilot brew house. This is a 2-barrel brew house. So this brews 62 gallons of beer at one time. Whereas remember, the production will do about 465 gallons at one time. This is our lab. This is where we do all of our experimental beers, our seasonals, some of the beers that don't sell fast enough to run through 15 barrels at a time. We'll brew those over here. We actually had most of this system in one of my partner's garage when we were first forming the business, and I learned how to brew on this small system right here. It's not powered by steam, it's powered by electric, and I have a gas burner that powers my hot water tank. Right now we actually have a new beer that's in here. This is a Kettle Sour. We're gonna make this one a Mountain Berry Kettle Sour. We're gonna try to produce the Mountain Berry flavor from the Kool-Aid brand from back in the 80s. So this is gonna be an experiment. Hopefully it'll turn out okay. But these little tanks here, these are all 2 barrels. These are 5 barrels. These are where we put our seasonals and some of our beers that sell pretty well, but not well enough to make 15 barrels out at a time. We'll put those over here. It's a lot of fun working on this side because it's just a big version of my homebrew system. And everything's manual, there's no computer controlled. I'm very comfortable working over here. It's more relaxing and not quite as stressful as making sure you hit every single number on your production side. Like I said, this is just basically a big homebrew rig. But it is a lot of fun. We do have glycol coming down from the ceiling to keep all the tanks cool. My heating element, like I said earlier, is electric. If you look back here, this is our electrical panel that I built to power just the boil kettle here. This is our pilot mash tun. And this is our pilot hot liquor tank, or just a hot water tank. This, like I said, this is our pilot mash tun. There's no rakes in here like there are over there. We have to get the grain out manually with the hoe. Over there, it just comes out when I turn the rakes on. But yeah, this is it. This is where we come up with some of our new beers. If y'all have heard of our beer, Reptar Juice, that's our hazy IPA, probably the one that we're most well known for. That actually started on a 5-gallon batch. We sold out in 2 hours. Then we brewed one batch of it over here to kind of get everything just right before I moved it to the production side. And then it took off like wildfire. And now I brew it multiple times a week. All right, so here's our tap room. Our tap room is rated to seat 264 people. We have a few video games over here in our entertainment corner that you can play. Right now they're not in operation because we've had to put them off limits for the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. We've also spaced all of our tables at least 6 feet or more apart. Normally we have almost 2.5 times as many tables in here. Right now we can legally seat 131 people. But we have drink rails, so you can kind of hang out over here, put your drink on the bar, kind of hang out with your friends and chill. Our TVs, these look like pictures, but they're not pictures. They're actually a flat panel TV. And we digitally display a picture up there. But we can independently control every TV over here and put different sports games on there, or ESPN, or whatever people would like to watch. You can get your canned beer straight out of our merchandiser. We currently commercially can a cream ale, a hazy IPA. Well, I guess let me start over. Our current cans are a cream ale called Unicorn Milk, a hazy IPA called Reptar Juice, a West Coast IPA called Industrious People, a cold style ale called Four Left Turns, a blonde ale called Corbin Avenue, and a raspberry milkshake IPA called Hingham or Kringleberry. You can find all those in grocery stores and bars around the state. Right now we're running cans in the brewery, and we can everything we have on tap, and we put it in our generic cans. So we have, right now we have our pale ale called Pickaxe, a Irish stout called Kit Lifter, a Mexican lager, a Hefeweizen, and a couple others in here. So you can come in and get any of our beer in cans right now. Walk behind the bar. So our bar has 26 taps. We have 2 wine taps right here. We have 2 nitrogen beer taps. So if you've ever had Guinness, you've had beer on nitro. Nitrogen is a gas. It's not soluble in beer. It's just used to push beer out of a keg. So you normally keg it, or when you carbonate the beer, you carbonate it at a little lower pressure. And with the nitrogen setup right here, it helps it have like a nice creamy thick head like Guinness does. And then we have 23 other taps. We have 2 ciders on tap right now. We do not produce ciders. I cannot produce wine or ciders. I'm only permitted to produce a malted beverage like beer, so I cannot produce liquor, I cannot produce cider or wine. But we do sell wine and ciders that other people produce. So right now we have a full selection of beer on draft for everybody to come in and enjoy. All right, so I talked about our cans that we fill here in the tap room. This is our single canner. This is a manual canner. And so what we do is we grab some of the blank cans that you saw in the merchandiser earlier. We purge them with CO2 because we want to get all the oxygen out of them. This is our CO2 tap right here. So we'll purge the can with CO2, then we'll fill it out of the tap with whatever beer we need to can for that purpose for that day. We'll put it in here, close it up, turn it on, and seam it, and then the can is filled. We can can by hand about 20 cases a day. It's a long process. It's not as quick as like a commercial canning line that you've seen in other breweries where you run 35 to 40 cans a minute. This is literally 1 can a minute, if not 1 can every 2 minutes. Some of the cooler things that we have at this brewery, we've done a couple cool things. I made a barrel-aged Russian Imperial Stout last year, and I made the base beer, and then we had 3 different barrels that we aged the beer in. It's an 11% beer. I aged one barrel was a red wine barrel, one was a maple bourbon barrel, and one was a Four Roses bourbon barrel, and we sold all those beers together in a mixed 4-pack. So the customer would get the base beer, the red wine barrel aged version, the maple bourbon aged version, and the bourbon aged version all at once, and they could try all 4 of them. It was a really neat experience for our customers, and I loved all of them. It was a lot of fun making. I bottled every one by hand. It took 2 weeks to bottle all those beers because it was about 2,000 different bottles. Some of the awards that we've won the Charlotte Clash of the Crafts. We were 2 years in a row. We won in 2017 and 2018. In 2017, we won with Corbin Avenue, which is our honey blonde. In 2018, we won with Unicorn Milk, which is our vanilla cream ale with a hint of blueberries. I've also got a few medals that we've won in the past couple years. These 2 here were actually national level medals. So the U.S. Open competition is a competition where it had about 7,000 different beers that were entered, and we were fortunate enough to take bronze in 2018 and 2019. And then we have a couple from the state competition called the North Carolina Brewers Cup, which are these right here. And then we had the Beer Wars, which is just a U.S. competition that's based in Charlotte, where last year we managed to place 2 places with 2 of our beers, which I was very proud of. Hope you've enjoyed your tour of 26 Acres, and I hope to see you all soon. Come by and get a beer. Let me know when you come by. I'll be sure to meet you here and have them with you. Cheers.
Hello, Bobcat family. Thank you for joining us in the 3rd installment of the Alumni Summer Series. We had so much fun touring 26 Acres Brewery with Bobcat brewer Eric Troutman. Please join us next Thursday, June 11th, as we have a financial chat with alum and Board of Trustees member Gary Moss Jr. Go Bobcats!